All right. Good evening.
Hi.
Hi. I am Teresa Hitchcock, principal here at Sheldon School. And before the budget meeting, I just wanted to share some highlights Sheldon has for this year so far. I had some of our different teams and departments provide me with some cute slides with information they wanted to share about things we've done this year or are consistently doing that are kind of wins here. So one of the things we do really, really well is our early ed program. So they use something called Get Set for School as part of their, where they integrate math and literacy skills into the early ed classrooms. They also really deeply embed social emotional learning skills, and they do this through our second step curriculum program. They've worked really hard to implement the pyramid model in our practices, and we use multi-tiered systems of support as in our early ed as well as all of our K-8 grades. One thing, some bragging rights we have, they do something called a teapot. It's like an assessment of things we've, the preschool level skills, and our classroom got 97%, which is really phenomenal on that scale and ranking. So I just wanted to share that win. We also we participate in P.E.G, which is Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports. We've been doing this for several years. When I started, we were a school who implemented it. But this last year, we received gold ribbon status, one of 10 schools in the state, for our successful implementation of P.E.G and our improvement in our behavior supports and our rollout of this program. We've seen a marked decrease in unexpected behaviors with our students by implementing this with fidelity. We also were selected to help them with, they interviewed most of the 10 schools who got gold ribbon status this year, so they created a compilation of why we were successful. And if you go to the Vermont PBIS website, you can see that short video where we kind of get to brag a little bit about our success in the programs. The third thing we want to share is our LEAPS program. We do a lot with LEAPS. We, at any given time, could be hosting roughly 80 students at a time in our after school and summer programming with LEAPS. They learn lots of academic skills, some social skills. They get to do some things that are a little bit outside the box and creative. Can't read that screen myself. So they get a snack with this program too. So those kids that might need some extra food get an extra snack in the time. In the summer, every week through the month of July has a theme. So it could be things like they did Summer Olympics one week, they did animal facts one week, and all the activities are usually around that theme. We welcome anyone in our K-8 program to participate in LEAPS, and so they can sign up to do that. We also have a phenomenal music program here. Mr. Comstock has been here for a long time teaching music. Our K-4 grades are doing, they do some vocal music. We have concerts twice a year for them. Our 4th through 8th graders can participate in instrumental music and classroom music. And they also have 2 concerts a year for the instrumental music program. We also our music teacher received a grant this past year to get some new steel drums. So we have a whole classroom set of steel drums that the kids are really, really having fun playing with. And they'll be part of the parade coming up, Maple Festival parade coming up. On a truck, they'll be playing some of the steel drums that we got the grant for through Vermont's arts grants. And they've done lots of things. They write music. Our 7th and 8th graders recently had to write theme songs for a duck tape derby contest they did. So they get a lot of exposure through our music program and do really well. We have about 57, I think, is it on here? Right now in band, we have like over 50 students in band, which is the most we've had. It's kind of crazy. And the room, if you go in there when they're having band practice, is busting at the seams. It's very, very full. And then last but not least, the other highlight we wanted to focus on was our STEM program. This is our 2nd year with this full-time STEM teacher. The students are learning everything Grades K through 8 are learning lots of different things about design, engineering, mathematics, technology. They're learning how to code little robots called Ozobots. They are building rockets and 3D printing parts for those. They got to participate in the Star-based program down in Burlington. Like I said, they just did a duct tape derby where they had to design their cardboard sleds and implement those. This is a picture of, they're doing mini golf courses right now. They're designing with and then printing the parts with 3D printers. So they're at the small scale. And each of the classes has done that in teams. So they also have to learn how to work collaboratively, which, as we know in society now, most jobs you have to work in teams. Most are not solo, so they're getting those skills as well. So the student learning how to code, they're learning how to write music using the computer as well. So it's integrating other aspects. So those are some of the highlights from this year. Any questions? Sorry, I talked a little fast. It's okay.
Thank you, Terry.
And we have about 5 minutes or so before we'll start the budget conversation.
We warned the budget for 6.
Yeah, so we've got about 5 minutes. Please partake more salad and pizza, butter.
So it is officially 6. I think we will go ahead and get started. Just to do some introductions in the room, I'm Lynn Coda, I'm the superintendent for Franklin Northeast.
And I'm Morgan Dado, I'm the CFO for Franklin East.
We have some board members in them and online, so we'll start with Mary in the back. If you'll introduce yourself.
Mary Niles, I live in Montgomery. Hi, Miranda Johnson, Sheldon.
Lisa, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Lisa Hango, and I live in Berkshire.
So thank you all for being here. Thank you to those in the room for being here. We have a budget presentation for you tonight. We'll start out with some celebrations, and you all should have an annual report on your table. We like to start that annual report with celebrations. There's a lot to celebrate, both with our staff and with our students at FNESU. And we have some Sheldon specific celebrations this year. Terry Sue already mentioned one of those, and that is that Sheldon was recognized with the Gold Ribbon Award for PDIS for the state of Vermont. Every year we celebrate the accomplishments of staff members across the supervisory union. And Brenda Cook, who is a para-interventionist at Sheldon, was recognized as the support staff member of the year for FNESU this year. So there were 2 big celebrations for Sheldon we're very proud of this year. I'll tell you a little bit about our district. So some people are a little confused about our structure. So we are Franklin Northeast Supervisory Union, and we have 2 districts. We're here tonight to talk about the Northern Mountain Valley Unified Union School District. And within the Northern Mountain Valley, we have 4 schools. All 4 schools operate pre-K through 8th grade. We've color-coded this. So you can see Sheldon is by far our biggest school with 325 students. Bakersfield is our smallest at 138. And Berkshire has 194. And Montgomery has kind of a growing population. They're up to around 174 right now. So those are our 4 schools that this budget covers.
And we start the budget discussions with the board and the discussions here with a look at enrollment. So this shows enrollment trends for the last 5 years, bringing us to school year 2026. And that is the 830 or so kids that Linda showed on the previous slide. We then make projections out, and you'll see over the next 5 years, we're planning on picking up about 130 kids. With small schools, those projections can change pretty radically from year to year, but we're right now projecting pretty significant growth in Montgomery and Berkshire, maybe a little bit in Bakersfield, and then Sheldon, our steadiest school, staying relatively flat. And what's important about that trend is it's very different from the narrative across the state, where we're seeing as a state declining enrollment, certainly pretty dramatic declines in the southern and the eastern part of the state. That's not the story that we're seeing in Franklin Northeast or in Franklin Chittenden County in general.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
How do you get those projections?
We create them. So what I do is I will look at each grade for each school from one year to the next and say, okay, how many first graders go to second grade? And we'll look at that over the last 5 years. We'll look at birth data that we get from the towns to see like what we're anticipating for pre-K in the next 3 to 4 years.
Nice, thank you.
On town meeting day, or if you vote early on your ballot that you pick up at the town clerk's office, the first 3 articles that you see are to elect the officers of the district. So a moderator and a clerk, and then 3 school board positions that are open, 3-year terms in Bakersfield, in Berkshire, and in Sheldon. There is a candidate who has filed in Bakersfield. No candidates filed petitions in Berkshire or Sheldon. So all 3 can take write-in candidates, and we've heard of people running write-in campaigns for both Berkshire and Sheldon. So I'm going to pay attention to that, and you can fill in names for any of those, and any town resident can vote for all of these positions. So just because you're a voter in Sheldon doesn't mean you should skip the Berkshire or the Bakersfield seats. The next article is the article looking for approval for the FY27 budget. So for next year, we're asking for authority to spend $24,700,000, which we're anticipating would cost $11,585 per weighted pupil. This per pupil spending number is the number that we use to compare ourselves to other districts in the state. It's kind of the metric that the state uses when it is talking about school spending in general. And so we will we'll dive into that number as we go on with this presentation. Just to put it in context, the 24/7 figure is about 1.7% higher than last year. And we'll talk about some of the drivers of that increase in a moment as well.
So when we build this budget, we focus on what our overarching board goals are. And we've been working on these board goals since 2022. These were board goals that were developed by the Supervisory Union Board. So what we're working on is academic proficiency at all levels. And in particular, we're working on ensuring that all students are reading on grade level by the time they leave grade 3. So we have a heavy emphasis on early literacy right now within the Supervisory Union. We're also focused on students being able to demonstrate proficiency from our portrait of a learner and the skills that they need. We're going to talk a little bit more about that for graduation and life beyond graduation. So that board goal is by June of 2028. And we're also focused in on our students being able to develop the social and emotional skills that they need to be able to succeed in life. Some of those skills are really centered on things like, and it's helpful to just think about in your workplace, the skills that others around you have that make them successful or not successful. And these are skills like self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, empathy for others, relationship skills, collaboration, being able to be a responsible decision maker, all skills that make healthy and productive humans. So those are skills we're working hard to achieve with our students. So I'm going to age myself for a little bit. I went to school in the 70s. I was born in the 70s, in the early 70s, and started school in the 70s. Back then, the skills that were in high demand from the workforce were really content-related skills. So writing, communication, reading, listening, speaking, things like that. Those were the skills that we were looking for in our students going into the workforce. Fast forward to 2025, there's some recent research that has come out. I know this is small. I'm going to tell you what this says. This is actually from the World Economic Forum, from a Future of Jobs survey in 2024. And this is a survey of a substantial number of employers from across the world. And it was intended to unpack what are the top core skills that they're looking for in the workforce in 2025. And you remember what it said in the 70s. Now in 2025, top 5 skills are analytical thinking, resilience, flexibility, and agility, leadership, social influence, creative thinking, motivation, and self-awareness. So these are all skills that AI can't replicate. These are all inherently human skills that are really important for our students to be able to have a grasp on when they leave us. So we've been working on this since about 2020-ish. This is our Portrait of a Learner. And these skills are very well aligned with the latest research. We're feeling pretty good about where we landed with those skills. So we're expecting all of our students when they leave us to be able to be proficient in these skills. Financially literate, independent decision maker, information savvy, creative thinkers, contributors, emotionally intelligent, and trustworthy. And if you think about some of the skills, there are indicators under each of these skills that unpack it a little bit more. If you think about the skills that we saw in the Future of Jobs survey, we have a pretty strong alignment with those type of skills.
How does this scale down to the elementary level? Because that's the high school model. Right?
This is actually pre-K through 12. So
Even
we've
though
been-
not all of our students will graduate from an FNESU school.
Yes. So these are, can you go back? So we're working on these skills. They're not necessarily building their graduation proficiency, but we have a scale that shows like what does financial literacy look like beginning in pre-K.
Oh, cool.
And
Is
what
that
is
on the? Is that on the
We're
website?
building it right now in the earliest grades. So they're starting, we have a pre-K 5 team working and a 6 through 8 team and a 9 through 12 team. So we have, you will see that as I'm going to assume that we might even have it by the beginning of next year. We do have, if you go on the website, there is a learning progression that you can see now. It doesn't track back quite as far as pre-K.
It
How far
does,
back?
it goes
K,
to
right?
K, and then we're working on where the pre-K kind of entry points belong.
So you can see the scale there, but these are showing up in everyone's classroom. So the idea is that we continue to work to build these skills over time, and even if they go off to BFA or to MBU, these are still helpful skills for our students to have as they move into any program. So the further along we get, the more students will have a good sense of these skills before they enter high school. So this is work that is complex, it's challenging. We're proud of this work. We feel that we're really centered in on getting our students ready for their future and not trying to protect the past that we have all been in. So we're adapting for them. We're doing it for these students because we know when they enter the workforce, the employers are going to want something really different for them and from them.
So back to the proposed budget, again, the budget is increased just over $400,000 or 1.7% over the current year budget. Some of the considerations that are going into that, we're actually bringing forward a budget that has about 6 full-time positions less than FY26. They're all positions that we are realizing through attrition, but a reduction budget to budget of 6 people. We're also seeing a $250,000 increase in tuition over last year, largely due to the fact that we've got another big 8th grade class that's going to be going to high school and a relatively small senior class that's graduating. It was a similar situation last year. We're hoping that that's now going to even out based on what we're seeing in the 5th, 6th, 7th grades. Some good news, we have paid off the Montgomery Elementary School bond, so that payment has gone relatively small in terms of the $24 million budget, but it at least is something going in the good direction. We are certainly bracing for cuts to federal funding. So this year, across our 4 schools, we have 3 staff who are paid out of federal grants. In this budget, we are moving 2 of them into the local budget. So that's already accounted for in this net loss of 6. We've actually gotten rid of 8 positions in the local budget, but are moving 2 in from federal grants next year to protect those staff. We're also knowing that there are going to be some pretty significant changes to Medicaid reimbursement. This is money that we use to fund the after-school program, and those Medicaid numbers then also directly impact our Title I funding and our E-rate funding. So we are bracing for headwinds from the federal government for FY27 and beyond. And then finally, we know we have PCB remediation that needs to be done at Berkshire. We're anticipating that we're going to need to do something in this building as well. This budget does not have anything specifically tied to those remediation projects. There's currently nothing from the state that is funding those projects. We know there are people in the State House who are advocating to come up with state level funding for that. And so we are kind of moving slowly on these projects, making sure we're doing everything we can to document what we're doing so that if there is funding in the future, we will be able to tap into that.
Can I just add on to that? So we're moving slowly because slow is the pace of PCB work. There are so many hoops for the PCB part of the work where it's, you know, you get to one phase and then you have to wait for this period of time until you get to the next phase. Sheldon is a little stalled right now. We have elevated PCBs in the envelope of where the gym is, but it is not so elevated that you can't have kids and adults in there because no one spends a significant amount of time in those spaces. But we haven't seen any movement from the state around Sheldon because we're relatively low, both Sheldon and Berkshire, on their priority list for PCBs.
I won't spend a lot of time talking about the staffing changes. In terms of Sheldon specifically, the reduction is around 3 paraeducator positions that we've cut. And again, none of those are people who are going to be losing their job at the end of June. They're positions that we've either not been able to fill or have chosen not to fill when somebody left.
Do we need them?
We don't think so. This chart and the next one show that $24 million budget broken out first by what we buy with the money. So the half in red is what we spend on our own people, first salaries and then benefits. At NMV, that makes up, again, half the budget. Statewide, that's about 80% of the budget. The reason that it's different for NMV is this big blue section, almost half on the left side, or purchase services. Most of that is high school tuition payments for our 9th through 12th graders. So there are some other things that make that up, but that's tuition is the biggest chunk after what we spend on our people. The only other thing I'd like to call out here is when we get to things up in green, this is really what we're spending on stuff. So that's paper, that's crayons, that's the utilities that you were asking about earlier. So only 2.5% of that full budget is spent on things. And so when we go to these meetings, there are a lot of people say if we bought our crayons in bulk from Maple Run, we would save all this money. Or if we took away the photocopier code from the teachers, we would save all this money. And what we're really talking about is that slice up here. If we're going to impact the budget, it's going to be how we pay tuition for high schoolers or what we do with our own people. And then briefly, the same budget is in what we do. So the section in green is kind of what we think of as typical education. It's teachers in front of kids in classes. And then each of these smaller sections in blue are things that support that education. So we have guidance counselors and nurses. We have technology and professional development. Our 4 principals. Central services is what mostly the bill from the supervisory union. So that would be for your special educators, for your food service workers, for us to come to these meetings. Operations and maintenance is the cost to maintain those 4 schools, chunk for transportation, and then this slice in red is the remaining bond payments on the debt for the other 3 buildings.
Do you have a question?
I had a quick
I thought I heard it from you.
question.
Sorry.
Oh, it's me back here. Morgan, the health insurance ended up going up, it was a 7.6%
Yeah.
increase for the year. So that accounts also for that, that's part of that 400
That's part of the
increase for
yeah,
the health insurance.
exactly. And that line might be down because we've also cut those 6 positions that had health insurance
Right.
tied to it. But yeah, that 7.5% is something that everybody's grappling with in this state.
And now we're looking at 40, correct me if I'm wrong, it's been 40% over the last 5 years,
And it's
pretty
been
much.
250% since, I want to say 18. Yeah. 250.
Right. And that's nothing that we set as a board, that is set at
Correct.
the state level. We have
Negotiated
zero
by the state.
control over the health insurance.
Correct.
Right.
Exactly.
So this next visual reflects the spending per weighted pupil for all the systems across the state of Vermont. So this visual has 119 lines that reflect the 119 districts that are served in the state of Vermont. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about these lines. So this right here, this larger print, shows you the bottom section from about here down. So these red lines reflect our partners in Franklin County. These two blue lines at the bottom, this lowest blue line is what we spend in Enosburg-Richford District. That's 11,139 per weighted pupil. This is our district that we're talking about tonight, Northern Mountain Valley. Whoops, I touched it. Did I do something?
No, you're good.
That's 11,718. So what I want to point out is there are 5 lines near the bottom that are schools that don't operate. So there are no students in buildings in those schools. They tuition out. So there are not that many lines below where we are, and that's for this current year. This first black line here reflects the Franklin County average per pupil, which is 13,243. This line here reflects the statewide average of 13,947. So you can see a very wide discrepancy from about 8,500, 9,000 up to close to just over 18,000. So there's a big difference in spending across the system. Some of that are choices around services. Some of that is also associated with schools that are contending with significant decline in enrollment. One thing to note is, I think Morgan found out today that the final couple of school districts in the state have warned their budget. So remember when I talked about those 5 systems that don't operate schools? Enosburg-Richford is going to drop down to be the lowest operating district in the state of Vermont next year is what we're projected. And Northern Mountain Valley will be the second lowest if all budgets pass. So it's significantly lower.
What if they don't pass? Do we go to the bottom?
We are at the bottom. The only ones that are below us are 5 that don't operate schools. So we would be at the very bottom of systems that operate schools. So we would be the second lowest and the ER would be the lowest.
And if the budgets don't pass, then we go back to the drawing board to figure out what we can cut from the budget that are already pretty bare bones.
Correct.
That's assuming people are voting it down because it's too high.
I think that it's challenging right now around school budgets because what we hear about the narrative in the state is not true for us. So when Morgan started talking, he was talking about the decline. Well, he was talking about our enrollment, but if you listen to what people are talking about in Montpelier, they're talking about declining enrollment across the state. That's not our reality. We're pretty stable with our enrollment here in FNESU. Southern parts of the state in particular have pretty rapid declines in student enrollment, so their numbers are really, really high, driving their tax rates pretty high in those places as well, generally. So our student population is pretty stable, and we're pretty frugal in terms of what we spend in our budget, but we're also pretty savvy in terms of what we chase for opportunities for our kids. So we'll talk about that piece next. We have many people within our system that go out and seek opportunities for our kids because we know that there are things that we just can't fund through our local budgets. So many people don't know that only about half the schools in the state of Vermont offer after-school programs like we do. And we've been chasing that 21st Century After-School Grant for, I want to say 15, 18 years at this point. We've had the benefit of that. We also every year apply for additional competitive grants. One of the most recent ones that we just received was an additional $533,000 targeted towards our Leaps After School program. We also received the Art Education mini grant in Sheldon that threw me for a loop. Courtney, I was expecting the other one, but this would be on the side. So the art mini grant, that was $5,000 that the art teacher went out to get. So these are just a couple of examples. We have a lot of other examples. When it comes to building upgrades, our facilities director is constantly chasing grants to be able to get us heating systems and energy efficient rebates and things like that. Our food service director, whenever we have issues in our kitchens, she is reaching out and she's finding grants for us to replace equipment and things like that. So I would say that we have a very savvy staff that's working hard to get money. We also had another award, another after school summer program grant award of $108,600. In Berkshire, we had a big boiler project. The amount that was awarded, in total, $236,000 of that was in grants. And the pellet boilers are expected to save approximately 11,650 gallons of fuel. That's 261,000 pounds of carbon emissions and about $3,000 in heating costs annually. And that was for Hoover, our facilities director. So even though we're low spending, we're working really hard to continue to work hard to find opportunities for our students. So I want to talk a little bit about the governance structure because there's a lot of discussion in the state around governance. And it became obvious to me after a meeting I had recently with teachers that some people don't understand what a supervisory union is and what a district is. So this is a comparison of us in Franklin Northeast and our governance structure with our neighbor in Missisquoi Valley. So Missisquoi Valley is a very simple governance structure. They are a supervisory district. So all of their schools send all their students to MBU unless they exercise Vermont's choice, kind of a lottery choice. So they have one employer, they have one budget, they have one payroll, they have one audit. So they can use extreme flexibility with both their financial and human resources, their things. We are much more complicated. So we are a supervisory union. So this is a supervisory union at the top, and we have two separate districts. We can't be one because on this side, we operate schools pre-K through 8 and we tuition out those 9th through 12th grade students on the NMB side. In the Enosburg-Richford side, they educate pre-K through 12. They don't tuition their kids out. Those students attend just those two schools. So when Act 46 happened, we could have been in a simple governance structure if people had voted to give up high school choice here. That didn't happen. So that left us in a supervisory union. So what that means is we actually have 3 employers, we have 3 school boards, we have 3 budgets, 3 audits, 3 payrolls. There's a lot of things that are duplicative in a supervisory union structure. There's also less flexibility. There are some barriers because of the 3 separate employers that are challenging. However, when we identify barriers, we work hard to try to figure out how do we get over that barrier and make things better for kids. So what we identified was it's hard to have certain positions filled at the district level because the needs of the students change and are fluid even within a year. So a good example is we have to provide emerging multilingual support for students. And sometimes those students move between schools or across the district in the middle of a year. So if we hired an emerging multilingual teacher here, but then all of those students moved over here, we couldn't just move this employer over there. So this district would have had more than they needed, and we would not have had enough over here. So we've looked at the supervisory union positions creatively, and we've identified what are the positions that need to be held at that SU level so that we can be flexible like MBU can with their staff. So now all of our emerging multilingual learner services are held there, our instructional coaches are held there, our technology integrationist, special education, food service, facilities, all of that is held here. And what that does is it allows us to look at the whole picture and say, you know what, we need this much support in this school, this much support in this school, and then we can move it as the needs change. Some of that is based on instructional coaching, for example. In Sheldon, you might have 5 new teachers one year, but only 1 the next year. So Terry Sue might have an instructional coach that's really busy in year 1 and not so busy in year 2. And if everyone was hiring their own instructional coaches, there are not enough to go around. So some schools would have that benefit while others wouldn't be able to fill the position. So we found a way to get around that barrier by holding them at the SU
Can I
level.
just clarify a word you're using? You're talking about holding, the word
Contracts.
you're using. You mean that's where it is budgeted and that is who employs those people
Yes.
as opposed to the individual?
Yes, and so then those bills, we kind of charge back to those districts, but it just allows us, because they're up here, we can say, you're gonna be 2 days a week here, and you're gonna be 3 days
So
a week
which is
here.
what is called the bill back? And
So, yeah.
the summary? Okay, thanks.
The other piece that people get confused about, and I'm glad Michelle's here today, we have alternative programs in FNESU, and that also is not something that happens everywhere. So we have, this is I think it's my 32nd year, and we've, in every school I've ever been in, we've always had some students whose needs are more significant than what can be met in the general education classroom. So there have always been students that have needed something like a Project SOAR, or a Laraway, or a Baird, something like that, a school that can meet them where they are at. So we did a little look this year and said, what are those out-of-district placements costing in FY26? So on average, these are just the area of some of the schools we used to send kids to. Per pupil tuition is ranging between $100,000 and $150,000 per pupil. If you send a child to one of those schools, you also have to pay their transportation per pupil. That transportation this year is between $40,000 and $60,000 per pupil. We have, after COVID, a lot of these schools either closed or they had significantly reduced staffing levels. And so we could not get students into some of those alternative programs. So we had high needs, very few resources. So Michelle and her team built our in-house alternative programs. So we have STEPS, which supports students who have intensive behavioral challenges, and RISE, that supports students with significant developmental disabilities. Those are both housed in Enosburg, so they're right in the middle. We take students from all 6 towns into those programs, all based on need. In the year that we are in, that cost us $47,000 per child. That's inclusive of transportation. We have 2 vans that are a part of that help with the transportation in and out of those towns and bringing kids out to do work in the communities, things like that. So we're able to do it at $47,000 per child instead of between $140,000 and $210,000. And we have no kids in out-of-district placement right now. So it's a significant cost savings, and we're able to do it in a way that kids are being more successful because we can phase them back into the general education setting in a supported way, because our staff can help transition them back. So kudos to Michelle and her team. I think we're doing well by our students, and we're certainly doing well by our taxpayers.
I'll just pause before we get into tax rates. Are there any lingering questions on the first half of that presentation? To get to numbers.
It could be addressed later. I asked this question last year, I'll ask it again. We're so far at the bottom of that scale of spending per pupil. What I asked last year, what are we not offering? And I reframed that by saying, what have we said no to?
Can you say that one more time?
So I asked, and if it's an answer this year, that's great. Fine. What are we not offering students here that even just within the county they're offering? I remember last year's answer. I don't know if those things are categorized differently this year. And what has been asked that the board felt they needed to say no to, if anything?
So there are some systems that have foreign language. We have talked about foreign language.
In county. I'm just looking at our Franklin County average,
Right.
let alone the rest. I'm not worried about the rest of the state at this point.
Remember, some of that is also driven by like how their student counts change as well. I would say potentially there are, in some of the in-county, there are probably some more vibrant arts programs that are happening, whether it's musical or theater arts. I think some of the electives that are offered. I think the reality is we're also working really hard here. We're going to talk about class size in a minute. We have some pressures from the state at the same time that we're having to really contend with in terms of our staffing levels that I'll get into. Anybody else think of any?
Interventionists in some schools
yeah.
are many more interventionists per
Right.
school.
And I think not, this is an example that we wouldn't necessarily advocate for, but because our salary is so much lower than Chittenden County, we have trouble hiring people. So when we go through and we say we've cut 6 positions that we haven't been able to fill, part of that's just because we can't get candidates. And so we have 2, maybe 2.5 SLPs currently, and there are systems in Vermont that have 1 for every pre-K class. And that's because that's where their salary is, and they're able to hire those people.
2 of the things that were mentioned last year, I wonder if they still hold, was language. Even for English first language students, additional language learning opportunity. And enrichment for students who are performing at expectation or above. Apparently that's seems to be enrichment rather than just part of the course. And I don't know if that still holds. Those were the 2 things that were mentioned last year.
It's hard to say because I don't have an inside look at what their budgets look like. I would say that our enrichment, I think we would put our after school program up against anybody in the county. I think the enrichment that we offer in summer and after school is really strong. We were actually the only system that was allowed a pass-through grant last year because we scored so high on our programs. I do think the foreign language piece, not EML, I feel like we're adequately, there's nothing that I feel like we are not appropriately staffed, but there are others that are above us in terms of ratio.
If we had access to more staff, we would probably be able to have a more robust,
Enrichment.
offering.
Yeah.
But yeah, for EL students, I mean.
But we had 1.4 in the budget, and we were only able to find 1.0. So that was one of the things that came out of the budget because we've had it in there over a year without no candidates.
Right.
And I had like 6 or 7 SLPs in my budget, and I can only find 2.5. I'm retired and kind of begged to stay for a little bit.
All right, so this will quickly walk us through how we get from a budget that's hopefully passed next week to residential tax rates. So we're asking for authority to spend $24.7 million. We know we're going to have about $100,000 in grants or interest or small chunks of money that are coming in. And so we subtract that out, and we only need to send the difference, or $24.6 million, to the state as a bill. So we're saying that in order to support this budget that was passed by the voters, we need the state, to send us this much money. They raise that money through homestead taxes, non-homestead taxes, and then a big bucket of other, which is primarily sales tax, some rooms and meals tax, some Medicaid money, the lottery money. And that money, that amount will come to us once we know what our budget is and what all the districts in the state know what their budget is. We take that figure, which is called education spending, divide it by the number of equalized pupils that we have, and that's where we come up with this 11,585. To talk quickly about that 21-23 equalized pupil number, LTW ADM, that is a weighted count of kids. So we only have 800 kids plus the however many kids that we have to pay high school tuition for. But we get to count some of those kids more, kids that the state has decided cost more to educate. So kids who are living in poverty, kids who are not hearing English spoken at home, are the two major ones. Small schools get a little bit of a bump up. So two of our schools, we get to count a little bit more because it costs more to run a small school than a large school. So that number is relevant, but it's not the number of actual kids that we have in the buildings. So every district in the state is going to come up with that comparable per pupil ed spending figure for their district. And the state will divide it by what's called the yield, which is a number that's set by the legislature. We will probably know the final number in June of this year. And per pupil spending divided by the yield gets us a district level tax rate of just under $1.31, or about a 5.5 cent decrease from the prior year. The decrease is due primarily to we're counting more kids, a very small increase to the budget, and right now that yield number is looking stronger. The yield number that we're using is the number that was proposed by the Department of Tax on December 1st, a number that most districts are using in their budget presentations, and everybody knows that this is not going to be the final number. The number that's been kicking around the legislature this week is maybe 100 or so higher than that, and it would bring this rate down for us and for everybody in the state by about another 5 cents. So as we talk about these projected rates, realize that this is 2 months ago, I would have said this is a worst case scenario. I don't even think it's a reality scenario anymore. It's going to be significantly less, but we won't know what that number is until later on the session. So you had asked about, what we do if a budget goes down. Somebody asked, it's possible that those towns that have to go back out to their voters for approval are going to be able to present a much lower tax rate. So if the message that they're hearing is, we're okay with the budget, we just can't afford the tax rate that you've proposed, the legislature goes in and drops it by 5 cents or drops it by 10 cents, they may be able to go forward with a larger budget and still a lower tax rate. So again, before we go to the next slide, to get to that district level tax rate, we take the budget you approve, less money we know we're going to have. That's our education spending divided by our kids. That's our per pupil education spending divided by the yield. And that is our district level tax rate. It would be great if the story stopped there and we would just say that your taxes are going down 5.5 cents, but we then need to apply the common level of appraisal. So on this next slide, you'll see we start with that $1.31, let's call it, proposed tax rate, and we divide it by the common level of appraisal for each of our 4 towns. The common level of appraisal is a number that the state calculates, and it's meant to ensure that taxpayers in each town are paying their fair share for property tax. So because it's tied to your property tax, it's tied to the number that's on your grand list and appears on your tax bill. And the state knows that not every grand list is as accurate as the one in the town next door. And so that is, for our 4 towns, is driving that final rate up. $1.53 for Bakersfield, $1.52 for Berkshire, $1.66 for Montgomery, and $1.39.5 for Sheldon. Sheldon actually, even with this worse than worst case scenario, would see a 2 cent decrease in their residential tax rate. And I think we've got a couple of slides on sort of just showing why the CLA does what it does. So if you look at here in Montgomery, my town, if my property tax bill says my property is worth $200,000, the state thinks it's worth $360,000 if I were to go and sell it on the open market. And that's up pretty significantly from $313,000 last year. In Sheldon, that $200,000 listed property, the state thinks is only worth $303,000. And that's why Sheldon's tax rate is lower than the other 3 towns in our district. It's to kind of take into account the difference in what they perceive the grand list accuracy is in each town. This shows since unification, kind of the trend of tax rates. Again, FY27, these anticipated ones we think will come down. You'll see Montgomery saw a big increase because of that increase in their property values. Sheldon, a slight decrease because their property values did not go up as quickly as the states did as a whole. And then for all four towns, and this is in the book as well, we're anticipating that even in our worst case scenario, if you're paying based on your income, so you have a household income below $115,400, you will see a decrease in the amount of taxes you pay. In Sheldon, even if you pay based on the full value of your property, so you have an income north of $115,000, with this scenario, you're going to see a slight decrease. And again, as that yield is set, we think that decrease is going to go higher, and some of our other towns may actually fall from an increase to a decrease.
So you've probably heard about Act 73. That is Vermont's education reform law that went into place effective July 1, 2025. Some of the elements in Act 73 that we're just going to tune you into today. The first is around statewide graduation requirements. So they are expected to come up with, the agency's already come up with a recommendation to the state board about statewide graduation requirements. And the state board is expected to take testimony and then by July 1, 2027, announce what those requirements will be for the class of 2031 and beyond. We are expected to have a statewide school calendar by July 1 of 2028. That's something the Agency of Education has been tasked with. For years, we've had regional calendars that superintendents have built, and we have, as a state group of superintendents, we've tried to get as close as we can to a statewide calendar. In the last 2 years have been very close. We saw when this law was passed, the number of private independent schools that were allowed to receive public high school tuition dollars decreased pretty substantially as a result of some of the language in this law. Also in Act 73, go ahead, one slide. There we go. There's language around class size minimums. So we've always had some language in our education quality standards around class sizes. This is new, however. In this law, we have a minimum number of students that we need to have, and it changes based on the grade band of the student. So, for example, no less than 10 students per first grade classroom, 12 students for second through fifth grade, 15 for middle school, 18 for 9th through 12th grade core classes. There are some variants in there depending on if there are classes at the high school level where they have to use specialized equipment, or some of the higher level AP courses. There can be some fewer, some courses offered with fewer students. We're held accountable for meeting these class size minimums. So if schools fail to meet the minimums for 3 consecutive years, then the State Board of Education may, after consulting with the Agency of Education, require that the agency provides technical assistance. They can adjust a supervisor union boundary. They can assume control of a school. They can choose to close a school, or they can require district consolidation. So this is law currently. This was effective July 1, 2025. So principals and my team in central office worked last year when this was coming to fruition to pay attention to class sizes going into this year, because we know our data from this year will feed into year 1 of this, and we want to be on the right side of this.
We're
David.
in all schools, no grade classes. We need because I know it's close, but that's what.
Yeah, our schools there are about, was it 100 schools?
Yeah.
There are about 100 schools in the state of Vermont that are smaller than our smallest school. So we're pretty close. We have a couple of grade levels across the district that, we had to make some adjustments with. We did a couple multi-ages, put a couple of classes together. In this law, you can't put more than 2 grade levels together. And some of the ultra small schools in Vermont, they might have like a K3 or a K2 together, they can't do that anymore. So they have to meet these minimums. So what's going to happen naturally in the super small schools is they won't be able to meet this minimum, and then they're going to have conversations about whether or not they're viable enough to continue to operate.
After 3 years.
Yeah.
But
Some are
that's to
already
allow
using
for
that.
bubbles and.
Yeah.
I know this is not a Sheldon question. Is Richford? How is Richford meeting closed? I'm only asking because I hear, we hear things. We
Yeah.
don't just assume, suppose one thing or the other. Is Richford closed?
So high school or elementary?
Well.
Elementary had 2 of every grade level, and we don't anymore.
Yeah.
Most are one class.
So that was a
we're
change.
good. That was changed.
What about the middle?
That was made. They were a little smaller than, they offer fewer classes. They were a little smaller. Class sizes were a little smaller than Enosburg, but not by much. So we made adjustments in the number of classes that we offer at both high schools
Okay.
to try to get ahead of this
Okay.
for this past year.
That's the part of Act 73 that everybody's talking about now is the map. So pretty significant governance changes. In theory, the legislature by July 1 of this year will pass a new map that will define what new districts will look like 2 years from now. Again, this is consolidating districts, so fewer LINs, fewer MEs across the state, but that in itself does not close any schools. They had appointed a task force to kind of do the heavy lift and bring 3 maps to them to consider. The task force declined to do that. And so really for the first several weeks of the legislature, the committees have been kind of stumbling to figure out where to start from. What I think I know as of today, and I've been playing some catch up on watching testimony, is that there are 3 maps that have now been proposed. One would be a single district run by a single board with a single superintendent, and it's combined with basically creating a voucher program for everyone. So you could take your money wherever you wanted. I'm pretty confident that that's going to be dead on arrival. The House has put forward a map for discussion, which in our neck of the woods would combine Northern Mountain Valley, Enosburg, Richford, MVU, and take Alburg from the islands and put them in a single district of about 4,000 kids. They've been very clear in saying this is a starting point. The task force didn't give us anything, so we had to throw something down on the map. But if the number you're trying to get is 4,000 kids, that makes the most sense for us up here.
When they wrote the law, in the law, it said districts said between 4,000 and 8,000 students.
The other plan that has been proposed in the Senate would be basically creating larger supervisory unions. So MVU, we talked a little bit about how they get to run more efficiently. That gets taken away. And all of Franklin County, and I think Grand Isle, would have a single superintendent, all the same number of districts, but it would be operate as an SU. I would say that's going to be a disaster if that happens, and I don't imagine that that's really the end goal for that map, but that's the other one that that will start getting testimony next week, and so you might start hearing about that.
So we talked about the complexity of having the 2 districts and the 1 SU. That would be something like 1 SU in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
So North Country.
11 or 12 districts under that SU structure.
But what are those latter 2 proposals do for school choice? We held out a long time.
So the second one would probably increase school choice, if anything. The first one,
Well, that's it.
in theory, would limit it further. So you would have a board that would decide about attendance between MVU now, Enosburg, and Richford. There would still be at 170 something school choice that kids could go out.
Because there's the
of
busing school
district.
choice, then there's the ultimate school choice.
Right, yeah. But yeah, any consolidation of a K-8 district with a K-12 district anywhere would reduce that tuition choice.
To me, a student anywhere in the state should have equal education. Why don't we just go around the whole state with one circle?
That's the first proposal, right?
Kind of, except then you're gonna send all your money to private schools. First proposal.
I don't know, each one has equal education
And,
throughout the state. You
you know,
should,
the idea of the way you're saying that, you know, that would be great if every child, I mean, that, in Vermont, we're supposed to have equitable educational opportunities no matter what the zip code of the child is. That's not what we have now. When we look at that visual and you show the disparity between the top spending and the lowest spending, where we are, we don't have that, to the point of your question. These are not equal educational opportunities. But that won't get us there. What that would likely do is it would, if we think we're spending a lot of money now, right, it would take the money that we currently have under the education system, and it would funnel out money either to private individuals who choose to homeschool, or it would go out to private independent schools, leaving fewer dollars to be able to operate some of these schools. And so you would actually see less opportunities for these local school districts.
my nephew made the comment, he said, if all the teachers, whatever the education level is throughout the state, all get paid the same, then you're not gonna fight from one place to another to get the teachers.
That would help us tremendously, because that's one of the biggest drivers here, is that we have tried to chase some other people in the county in terms of salary, and we try to accelerate in our negotiations, and then they negotiate behind us, and then they take those accelerated steps ahead and we can't catch. So there is some, in thinking about this, wherever you're merged with, the idea is that you would go up to the highest level of contract. So at least within whatever new district you are, there would be an equalization, but you'd still be competing with other districts. What a lot of people have talked about, a statewide teacher's contract, but that isn't going to solve for what the governor is trying to solve for, which is lower taxes for Vermonters, because you have to take, no one's coming down. So you're going to have to take the top salary, which I want to guess is probably South Burlington.
Yes,
So
yeah.
that'd be a fair guess, I think. And you're gonna have to take all the teachers and put them at that level. And then those teachers won't be happy, because they'll talk about cost of living when you work out in a county that costs more to live in. So it will drive tax rates up pretty substantially. But it would get us to more equal educational opportunities.
Absolutely.
My uncle always said though too, if you wanna make more money, go sell.
So
So a few other points on the governance changes. In theory, when they draw these new districts, they're also gonna have to draw voting wards, because they are gonna have some more uniformity with how school boards are elected. It's very haphazard coming out of Act 46. So I don't know what it would be up here, but maybe Enosburg gets a seat and Montgomery and Richford together get a seat and Sheldon Bakersfield together get a seat. However it is, they have to draw that map as well. Then we would need to elect those school boards. They were proposing in November of 2027. So December of 2027, the board is seated. They have to then hire superintendent, which involves a search process. Superintendent has to hire staff, and in theory, going live by July of 2028. So 7 months between school board election to go live.
it's a
Most
very,
of
very
us
short on
I
ramp.
think that that's pretty
Hire
ludicrous.
every position.
I was hoping that we would be spending this session arguing about fixing that timeline rather than arguing about even what the map's gonna look like.
Did
whether
they
we have
drop
SUs or not.
professionalization of school board representatives?
In the governor's first proposal, I haven't seen that in this.
Okay.
And then along with those governance changes are funding changes. So we have a pretty unique system in Vermont, kind of tipped it as we were going through the tax rates. We, as the voters of NMV, can pass whatever budget we want, and the state is required to come up with the money to fund that. We're the only state that does it that way. There are 46, 47 that do it in kind of an opposite direction. And basically the state says, okay, these are your students. This is how much we're giving you per student. here's your budget. You don't have to go to a vote for that amount of money, but you have to live within that budget. There would be some mechanism under Act 73 that if districts wanted to spend more, they could go to their voters and say, hey, we need to spend $15,500 per kid, not $15,000 per kid, or whatever the number is. But for
10%.
it starts at 10% and it ratchets down to 5%, maybe 10 years out. But it would be a significant windfall for us in the lowest spending districts. If we come anywhere near an average, we're going to have more money to spend on our kids, and those districts that are at the top are going to have to bring their budgets down. Right now, it is contingent on governance changes. So if the map isn't passed and this funding doesn't go into effect, there seems to be some interest, some people's part, of pulling this out and saying, you know what, we need to go forward with a different funding system either way. That 2-to-1 spending gap is indefensible. And so we want to do this even without the governance changes. There's also change to the tax credit for people who pay based on income. And then they've finally split out the non-homestead tax list. So they're looking at ways to, rather than having a single rate for rental properties and businesses and camps and second homes, to be able to use different levers for different types of property. My assumption is to incentivize rental property to help with the housing crisis, but they haven't really tipped that yet.
One of the pieces with the shift to a foundation formula is it also comes with some tax equalization. So it would provide us more opportunities for our students. It will likely raise the tax rates for our voters. So because if they're losing opportunities at the top, they will also decrease their tax rate at the top. So the bottom will have to go up in terms of tax rate, the way it's currently written.
So one other money article on your annual meeting ballot, and that is looking for authority to transfer the money that was left over at the 2025 school year into the capital reserve fund. So we have a fund that's long been established, and we are putting a little bit of leftover money away into it every year. And we are using that for things like the other part of the boiler project in Berkshire that was not grant funded. Things that are kind of big building-based projects that we aren't kind of putting in part of the annual budget process because they're sort of outsized. It's a very small dollar amount this year, but the board wanted to kind of keep that article on the ballot and in front of voters, since we've done that, I think, every year since we've been a unified district. And then lastly, early voting has begun, so you can vote now by going to the town clerk's office and picking up a ballot and filling it out there, or picking it up, mailing it back. Keep in mind that the mail does not work as well as it once did in Vermont, and so leave yourself time if you do that. And then to vote in person, it's going to be at the school here between 7 and 7 on Tuesday, March 3rd. And with that, we'll try to answer any questions.
I guess mine comes back to the question on the utilities. Do we look to save what we can save there?
We do, but again, remember that's the 2.5% of the budget. So,
But it's still a saving.
So I think one of the examples of that, I would say, Brian, is that we have, where we're able to, try to be more efficient in terms of like the lighting project that we did in every single school. We drew down, I don't remember how much grant money, but it paid the majority of that project. So we're saving money from all of the LED lights transfer. Also, that Berkshire boiler is going to save us pretty substantial money.
This is just with the town of Sheldon with their water and sewer billing.
I don't know anything about that one. Do you have a question? You look like you were ready.
Oh, actually, random thing that I saw, it sort of supports utility question. I will claim a bit of ignorance in this department. how come telephone and voice services, how does that make a $12,000 part of the budget? I don't understand.
Yeah,
And I mean, we're talking about, I think they're all VoIP now anyway, so when
Yeah.
we got power, we had a major problem with, when power went out, last year, we
Yeah.
dealt with that and, in terms of having to figure out a backup, because we are in a cell dead zone.
Right.
Everything's moved to VoIP. How do we contact parents without having to drive halfway through the Springs
Mhm.
in order to notify folks? And
Yeah.
yet, at the same time, we have a $12,000 budget for telephone and voice.
I can guess. I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but if you shoot me an email, I'll
Yeah,
look
I
into
mean,
it.
this is not the hill I want to die on, but it's just a
Right.
weird, when you
Yeah.
look through it, that's a weird looking number.
Is that Sheldon specific?
Yep.
Or is that?
Yep, it's
Yeah.
page 21.
Yep,
So
we can get
it's
back
towards
to
the end, it's just Sheldon. But my other question was more, since we're looking at aspects to do with what might happen down the road, which we don't have answers for, but also as part of the district that fought for school choice, I don't see, I'm not sure where it's represented in the documentation in terms of students in NMV who are going outside of, out of district, especially further than MVU, BFA, Enosburg. Like how many and if we have a reason, like an understanding of why, just from a statistical standpoint, of why they make that choice. If there's a very broad brush strokes, but is it educational opportunity or is it other stuff?
We haven't surveyed kids. That would be an interesting thing to do. Courtney's gonna pull up a visual. Do you know which one I'm talking about? The wave that Morgan created?
So, yeah, I can tell you in building this budget, we anticipated, I think those are 297 kids, high school kids. And these are rough numbers. 190 we anticipate are going to Enosburg or Richford, so our two high schools. Maple Run, 65. MVU, maybe another 15. And then scattered across the rest, looks like 15, 20, maybe another 25. So it's actually the ones who are going outside of Enosburg, Richford is pretty small, and the ones that are going outside of the county now is very small.
And what does that turn into? Because there's only transportation budgeting for the three closer. What does that end up being in a dollar amount or a percentage of what we end up spending? Is it small potatoes? Is it a big
In
number?
terms of the transportation? piece
No,
of
not the
it?
transportation. Those who are going to schools for which we are not funding transportation. So
Yeah.
the non BFA, ER.
Yeah.
So it depends on where they're going because the tuition rates vary.
Yeah.
But the other piece is that if we weren't sending the 1.6 million that we send to Maple Run each year, if those kids were all in Enosburg and Richford, the tuition rate for Enosburg and Richford would drop pretty dramatically because they have so many more kids. And so those other 190 kids that we're paying for and the ones that were going to Maple Run, all of those would drop.
Right.
So when we were looking at, this was before Sheldon was in Franklin Northeast, the first vote that was not successful on unification, the only savings that we were really projecting that was of any significance would be pulling all those kids into one system.
So the reason for my question is not that so much as finding out what needs are we not meeting? Some might be far beyond our capability, but what needs are we not meeting that cause those people to go further than MBA or
Sports.
BFA? So I don't know if that's the ski schools. I don't know if we're talking about going to Rice because it's the theological based school. I don't know if it's, I don't know. It would be nice to have an idea because we are in Sheldon, our tax rates are not increasing, but we're still waving around this low per pupil spending like it's an achievement. I do not think that's an achievement.
I don't think it's an achievement either.
I realize that through NMV, I realize that all of NMV does not have tax rates going down and all, but are more vulnerable, what I would consider to be our lower economically achieving, that's the wrong word, but the lower rates in terms of where the home value is, that's not going up. Do we know that we have opposition to spending that on our children?
Well, we're 2 years away from 3 rounds of budget voting. So we've got some recent history that I think rightfully makes the board nervous about adding a lot of spending to the budget.
But there's nothing that surveys the people why they're turning it down. If those aren't folks that choose to come to a board meeting to talk about it, you don't know why.
Right.
This is part of the problem, is that you're informed, you've done your research, and you understand this. Some people are not informed at all, and we've seen it every year. Well, they'll take the state context, and there'll be a campaign usually sometime in this week to vote down our budgets based on the state. In terms of choosing MVU, VFA, I often hear hockey and football as two of those.
I understand about those schools. I'm wondering about the further afield. Because, for example, any of these proposals, I know we're not dealing with what might come in a year or two right now, but when we look at what those possibilities are, those needs will, in a way, end up being met, or probably become part of the fabric of options, those ones that are nearby. But that's what I'm wondering about the further afield, or
Yeah, I think
or the people that have concerns about the social environment of their school and do not feel that they have a home or that they have a place in the social environments of the schools that we have here, and that perhaps that's a place we haven't done enough.
Right. I think even farther afield, sports is still an issue, at least for folks who choose to go to other public schools. Private schools are, we've got kids at prep schools, and that's, I think parents looking to put those kids on a different
But
trajectory.
there's no data. It's
It's all
educated guess,
conversations.
but it's not.
Yeah.
It's
And
not.
certainly in Montgomery, we have in the past, more so than now, with the changes to tuition on Act 73, have seen families move in for the 4 years that they have a high school kid so that they can take the voucher and go wherever they
We
want to
sent a
send
lot
that
of
kid
kids to
anyway.
Stansted over the years, just across the Canadian border in Derby. And that was a hockey situation in most cases.
St. Johnsbury Academy.
Yeah.
You don't have an idea what slice of the pie that is, though.
In terms of the
Yeah.
total numbers for those non-kids, I think it's about 25 next year.
Well, you said about 25 kids, but the approximation of the amount of money that goes out.
Oh,
Beyond.
I could come up with that. The number I know off the top of my head is BFA, because that's where most of the kids go that go out of.
Maybe when you get back to her, could you share your visual that looks like a flag?
Yeah.
It kind of shows where it takes all of our elementary students in the NMV schools, and then it shows what happens to them when they go to high school. Like there's a
Where they
big
go,
strip
what
that
they do.
stays in ER, and then there's a smaller strip that stays in the county. There's a teeny strip that goes outside of the county, and an even smaller strip that goes. But that doesn't have, I think you're trying to get at the cost part.
Well, it's a bit of both, but I mean, when I look at what are we not doing, what are we not able to do, what we're, sure, it's got to do with cost. I'm a little more interested in the quality of the education, but I'm not going to discount anyone else's concern about cost. But to get an idea, if you're going to follow the money to see what we need, then that is trying to figure out when you vote with your feet that way, that says a lot to me. If we've got, families that say, wow, this was not a good experience, something was not good, and we're out, that's one thing, as opposed to looking for an enrichment. That's a different thing altogether.
And I think we have both, to be honest. Like, I think we have some families that have left because they haven't felt like they've had the experience that they wanted. We've had other families that have known all along that, hockey is a good example. We have kids that start I just said hockey, but I really mean football. I'm thinking the Steeler football program, and they start with little, teeny tiny tots all the way up. They're prepping to go on to want to play football.
Also where parents work. Sometimes kids will go to school in the town that you work work in.
We have some kids that'll go to like an Essex Tech has a lot to offer there. We have sent some kids to South Burlington.
But academic rigor and a sense of belonging especially a sense of belonging go a very long way.
And if you think, if we suddenly pulled 80 high school kids back into our 2 high schools, think about the pressure we're having on class size, and that actually allows you to have conversations about we can offer more language now because we have more kids and we're not
I'm
going to
not
bump up
necessarily
against that.
advocating that we don't have the choice, but I'm just looking.
Right.
It's a matter of using that information to be an indicator for where we can do other things that might have a budgetary impact.
To me, one of the other things is like, when I went at the high school, you come from a school of 100, with the VFA, go there, it's 3,000. It's like, it was almost overwhelming. And the kids that come from the city, they were more experienced than we were. At a lot of different things.
Yeah. I feel like I need to name that we have some kids that go on to our high schools and do really, really well.
Yeah.
They do really great things both in the high school and then beyond both of our high schools. And I would say, to your point about belonging, I couldn't agree with you more. Like, developing that deep sense of belonging in schools has been a primary driver of a lot of the work that Michelle has done over the years, and all of our principals have been doing as well. That's a constant work in progress, as you can imagine, because we accept all students, and all students come through the doors and with different world experiences, and sometimes they require a lot of attention and a lot of support to get over some habits that they have, which impact other students' experiences in our schools.
And to me, the other part of the high school thing is the age difference.
What do you mean?
When we went, we were 14. There are kids that are 18.
Oh.
They were like-
school.
At that time, they were legal age to drink.
Yeah. You dated yourself on that one.
But it's one of the things, it's like, when you're in grade school, you kind of knew everybody and you're all like the same age. But when you went to high school,
Culture shock.
it seemed like a big age difference.
Any other questions? Mary, Miranda, Lisa, any of you have a comment you'd like to make?
I'll just say that I really hope that people will communicate with their friends, their neighbors in the community, and direct them to our website where they can watch this whole presentation if they weren't able to make it to any of the in-person events, and try to kind of help explain the importance of supporting this budget and recognizing that we do a lot with a little. We're really mindful of threading that difficult needle between opportunities and what we want to see for our kids, and improving salaries for our teachers and staff, and also acknowledging the hardship of property taxes for people in the community. And that's this delicate dance that we do every year. And like Morgan said, we're not too many years off from having had widespread budget failures. And so hence continuing to try to be very mindful around what we're asking of our taxpayers to support. And, we are hoping that in the next couple of years, this Act 73 will bring greater benefits to our community, to our students, to our families, with an influx, hopefully, of better, more resources, so that we can begin to look at some of the programs and opportunities that we aren't able to offer that are offered elsewhere. But we do a really amazing job doing a lot with a little, and just hopefully try to get the word out to get people to support the budget. It's really critical. And it's a really sound budget that we're presenting the voters this year.
Thank you, Mary.
to me on that scenario is, I look at it as like the ones that are on a house and the taxes are escrowed into their payment. Once that gets, they're just making it buy on what they're paying out, then when the tax bill goes up, and it's like, they're almost like kicking them out because they can't afford to stay. And they have no choice. That it's escrowed into their payment, and they're at the limit what they can pay presently, and when it goes up, they lose their house.
Unfortunately, Brian, like that is, education is one part of that problem in the state, and I know that the legislature is looking at all parts of that. I think health insurance in particular, healthcare costs are impacting everyone. And they are certainly impacting our budget. If we think about from 2018 until now, it's a 239%, Morgan,
250.
250, something like that.
Yeah.
Percentage increase, it was 18,000 something per family plan. Until this year, it was 40,000 something per family plan. And that's not a lot of years from 2018 until now. And it's a huge, huge factor in this budget. So we have housing issues and healthcare issues, two of the big drivers. And I'm sure we can name a few others as well. And I know the legislature has their hands full. This is one element in addition to fewer and fewer Vermonters, which is making it a less affordable state. So there are a lot of factors playing into that. Thank you all for coming tonight. Appreciate you coming out on a vacation. And
Take
Terry Sue is
pizza,
pointing at the
please.
pizza.
Yeah, right.